Sometimes life lets you down and you feel that you are done. You just want a morning run because the fun is all gone. But sometimes life makes you proud when you look far and wide, when you leave the pain behind and see the brighter side. TNC gives you inspiration. TNC reignites your passion. TNC starts your transformation. TNC helps you see the new you.
The new channel. The new channel.
The views, opinions, and insights expressed in the following show are those of the hosts, producers, guests, and viewers. They do not necessarily reflect the position of the channel. Viewer discretion is advised.
Hello and welcome to the new channel. We are here to help you see the new you. This is Foreign Affairs, and I'm your host, Lee O'Brien. Hello, everybody. This is Lee O'Brien. Welcome to Foreign Affairs. Welcome back. Here we are on episode 3, September 29th, 2020. And we'd just like to welcome all of you here. Today's show is going to be great, and it's very personal and dear to my heart. Can't wait to invite a good friend of mine, a gentleman I've had the pleasure of working with, as well as knowing here in the country, in the Philippines, and really goes along in the style of foreign affairs. If there's one guy I can call on who's definitely been a foreigner and definitely been a local, this is the guy. I decided to spruce up the shirt. This guy, right off the bat, I will tell you, has one of the best senses for dress that I've seen, has some of the most crazy shirts. So I'm anticipating, I just wanted to pay honor to him. So I thought I'd throw on one of my best shirts for him as well. But a gentleman that I actually met a couple years ago. We had the opportunity to do a theater production here in the country called M Butterfly. And during the production, during the practice, and then eventually all the shows that we did, the run that we had, this gentleman I got to know really well, he and his wife, and just an amazing person who just emanates so much good feeling, love, but also just a lifetime of experience and knowledge. And he's someone who's lived in various countries, grew up in one country, moved to another, and has been here in the Philippines for over 20 years, and has worked in various different industries and different teachings. And he has quite a bit to share. So I'm going to stop talking and I'm going to get him on this show. I'd like everyone to please welcome Mr. Norm McLeod. Norm, you there?
I am. How are you? I loved your introduction. I wish I could have been, I hope I live up to it. Let's put it like that.
Yeah, no pressure on the shirt. I'm paying homage to you because I know your shirt
I cracked
collection.
down today. I thought I'm coming on the Leo Bryan show, and I thought I'd better actually dress down. So none of the bright ridiculous over-the-top shirts that I usually wear. I think this is actually quite normal, actually. There we are.
It's all good. We got the loose flowing shirts.
The loose flowing,
We're
yeah.
in the tropics. So
Yeah.
we're just
You're not going to see the rest
first of all, I've got to say, what's that?
Sorry? I didn't hear that.
I wanted to say right off the bat, I wanted to tell you we're sorry for chopping up your name. I know the Philippine tradition of ruining a foreigner's name. Didn't want to do that, so it's Norm McLeod.
Yes.
Hope we get that right.
Yes. Perfect. Can't complain.
I'm gonna. I wanted to get that out of the way. I know we're pulling you off a voiceover job right now. So
yes, I'm doing an audio book.
I'll keep it.
Audio book.
Just to add another talent onto the top of the skills that you got. I appreciate you being here and taking the time. I know you're busy, so I didn't want to, step on toes, but tell the producers thank you. And from our producers and myself to you, thank you for being here today. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Thank you. No, I'm sure they're fine about it now.
Yeah.
They're probably glad to have a break.
Right on, yeah.
Early this morning. And we did go quite late last night. So I'm pretty sure when I said, look, guys, I have to leave here for about an hour and a half, they all went, thank goodness. So we're here and we're going to talk. We're going to have fun. The book I'm reading, by the way, you may want to know, is a historical book. It's called The King in the North, which is about the first king of England, about the 6th, 7th century. And it's been quite fun hearing about it, reading about it. And many of the places mentioned in the book, of course, I visited because I lived in England for 25, 30 years. So I toured around England. So I've got a pretty idea of where all these places are. It's been good fun, good fun.
That's great. That's great to have such a personal connection to the actual material you're doing.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
It has been amazing.
Let's yeah. No, that's great. I mean, that adds so much leverage to your performance, which is always good to have. Always.
Well, it's always fun. And also, one of the things that comes in, this is probably way offline, but let's talk about it. He spends some time around Hadrian's Wall. Now, Hadrian's Wall is a wall that goes from one side of the country to the other. The Romans built Hadrian's Wall. In fact, Hadrian was a Roman because they couldn't cope with the Scottish fighters coming down. And the Scots, if you think about the film Braveheart, well, those are the kind of weird, wild Scottish people. And they were coming down and foraging and stealing cattle, but also having a great time fighting with his people. So he thought, sod this for a law. So he actually built a wall, literally, from one side of the country to the other side of the country. Now, when you go there now, a lot of it's fallen down, or farmers over the years have sort of stolen the stones to build up their own places. But it's quite fun because we were coming down one day, and my kids who were brought up in the Philippines, because we came over to the Philippines when the boys were 6, 4, and 2, yeah. So when we went back there a few years ago, and we were sort of doing a mini tour of the entire UK, we went down to Wales, we went across to Ireland, we then came from the north of Ireland over to Scotland, and then we came down through England. And as we're coming down, my youngest one, who by then was probably about 16, said, I don't know anything about our country. Why don't we go to Hadrian's Wall? And I said to him, Hadrian's Wall is basically just a pile of rocks, but we'll see what we can do. So we were driving down the west coast of the country, and I saw this sign saying Hadrian's Wall. So we took a little sidetrack there, and I couldn't believe we'd gone no more than about 20 kilometers off the main road, and we suddenly came to this wall, which was still about 8 foot high, and we followed it through a farmer's field and came to one of the forts, because every sort of kilometer they would have a fort with about 20 soldiers, and they literally manned this thing for about 6 or 7 years. And this was the fort. They'd actually dug up the fort, and although it was only about 2 feet high, each thing, you could see where the stables were, where the bedrooms were, where the eating places were. So that was a sort of a fantastic unexpected thing. But that was good fun. So when I'm reading this book now, and I read about Hadrian's Wall, I can say, yeah, I've been there, I've seen it.
That's great. That was awesome. And that's great that your kids had that, that sense of inquiry to go in to look at, physically go see the history of where you and they came from.
Yeah.
That's nice to hear that your kids are inquisitive as such. You know what I mean?
Inquisitive, that's the right word. I like the word inquisitive. Because I remember one of my kids, we were coming across a bridge once, the bridge that links Wales to England. And he was only about a year and a half, 2. And he said, what kind of bridge is this? And I said, this is a suspension bridge. And he said, oh. And all we could hear for the next 30 or 40 miles was suspension. Until he finally got suspension bridge. So, you sort of love these little moments, and you remember these little moments over the years because of all the things that they've seen and heard. And the oldest one is now 35 and the youngest is 27. So all these things they've seen and heard over the years, their experiences in the Philippines, their experiences back in the UK, it all sort of adds up because they're always asking questions. They're always seeking the answers to everything, which is good fun. Love it.
Absolutely. So actually, let's keep riding the topic that you brought up, not necessarily about England, but you brought up a very good point to give backstory on you. You've been here in the Phils now for about over 20 years, correct?
Yeah, about 24, 25 years now.
24, 25 years. And I thought something very interesting about your lifetime, apart from all your professional experiences and apart from where you've lived, because we'll catch up to that too. I'd love to talk about your roots here in a little bit. I think I found it interesting that you were able to come to the Philippines with children. So you had an experience of both raising children in the UK previously and then also here in the Phils. And I really wanted to ask you, what were some big differences or adjustments that you had to make when you came to the Philippines in terms of child rearing and bearing?
In terms of child rearing.
Not bearing, rearing.
Huh? Well, the first thing is, when you grow up in the UK...
Bearing stays the same, I hope.
What's that? When you grow up in the UK...
Child bearing was the same, I think.
Child rearing, yes. I didn't do any of the child bearing. That was my lovely wife. But child rearing...
Yes.
We as I say, there were 6, 4, and 2 when we arrived. And it was very funny when we arrived. I don't know how many of your listeners and viewers know this, but the company, in its infinite wisdom, has put us up in a hotel in P. Burgos. Now, if your people don't know this, P. Burgos is the red light district of Manila. So we had a hotel in P. Burgos, but the kids were hyper. They got off the plane at 11 o'clock at night, and they were hyper. So we wandered down to the old Greenbelt, where there was a pizza place, which stayed open until about 4 o'clock in the morning. And we had the kids there, and they were up and down the slide and in the ballpark and all that sort of thing. But we then walked back to the hotel. And as we turned into P. Burgos in the middle of the night, or 2 o'clock in the morning, my youngest, the eldest son at the time, the 6-year-old, said, wow, this looks like Disneyland. Can we go into these buildings? And my wife turned around and said, you will not go into these buildings until you're at least 21 years of age. Well, as it happened, he never bothered. We lived here in the Philippines for such a long time, we never actually bothered to go back again. And of course, within a couple of weeks, we'd moved out to a more salubrious place, which was in Ortigas, actually. We lived in Ortigas for a while. So that was the first thing. The second thing about bringing up children here is, you come from the UK, the children have to look after themselves. All right, mum will cook, mum and dad will do the cleaning up, mum will do the hoovering and all that sort of thing. But the boys are taught from an very early age that they have to make their own beds in the morning. Once they've had a meal, they have to take their plates and cups back to the kitchen and put it in the kitchen sink. And when they take their clothes off at night, they have to throw them into the wash basket because we can't walk around after our kids all the time. So here we are, fast forward, we've come to the Philippines. As I say, we've now got a 6-year-old, a 4-year-old, and a 2-year-old. And the first thing we did was we got a lovely yaya who did everything for them. So we had to stop her after a week or two and say, no, 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 we don't know how long we're going to be here. We may actually be here for a year. We may be here for 2 years, 3 years. We can't see ourselves staying any longer, says he now, 25 years later. But you cannot unteach our children what they know. So the kids have to throw their own washing in the wash basket. They have to pick up their own plates from the table. And you can play with them. They have to put their own toys away at night. They can't just leave the toys all over the living room floor. They have to put them back in the toy box. And it took her a long time to realize that we didn't want her running after the kids all the time. And eventually we succeeded, because she eventually realized that they had their things to do. And it actually, years later, was quite fun, because when one of the boys was going to school one day, and he came rushing along and he said, Mum, I haven't got any trousers for school. And my wife said, well, where are they? And he said, they're in the middle of the bedroom floor. Well, that's where you'll have to wear them, the old ones from the middle of the bedroom floor, because if you put them in the wash basket, they would now be washed and hung up. So they learned that this is the way to do it. And of course, when they all went back again in their early 20s to the UK, they knew how to look after themselves. They weren't spoiled, as it were. That was part of it. That was part of the learning process. And obviously the other thing is being understood. We thought this was very funny. The first day at school, we went to go and pick up our 6-year-old, and he was walking towards us, and we heard, okay, guys, I'll see you tomorrow. And he got into the car and we said, what was that? And in his English accent, he said, well, the trouble is, Dad, they don't understand English. I have to try and pretend to be American so that they understand me better. So that was a kind of bizarre thing. So we had these kind of school accents and friend accents, which everybody understood. And then home, they would still speak in their English accents. So that was another sort of thing we all got used to over the years. One of the other things, look, one of the great things is, of course, in the UK, it's cold for most of the year or half the year, whereas here they're living in this beautiful tropical climate, sun everywhere. They swam like fish. They knew how to swim before they came here, but they continued that, and they could actually do 20 to 50 lengths down a good swimming pool, whereas I'm lucky if I can manage 5 before puffing and panting and looking like a beached whale on the side of the swimming pool. But they could do 20 to 30 to 40 or 50 lengths, even at an age like 10.
Right.
We try to get them out as well. We've been to many places in the Philippines, not just locally, but we've been to as far south as Davao, we've been as far north as Vigan, and anywhere in between. So we've tried to give them a real Philippine experience, not just city boys in Manila, but country boys, and appreciating the culture of the Filipinos. In fact, they're probably more Filipino than British, because remember, they spent 20 years of their lives here. So they are probably more Filipino than British. And now that they're back there, they're all happy and got their own relationships. But all their relationships are, they've got Philippine friends, they've got British friends, they've got American friends. And I think that's one of the benefits of having an international international experience. They are multicultural, shall we say. Very good, very good. It was fun.
Yeah. And as parents, for you, was, the kids, they from 6, 4, and 2, there's a lot that they're learning or experiencing that just kind of is thrown at them, and that's their experience, and that's how they learn. For you and your wife, was there a culture shock or a wall that you guys kind of hit, or were there some? I'm assuming there were stumbling blocks. I think we all have them when we go to a new land. But what exactly were you guys running into at the beginning, and what did you eventually overcome in terms of being parents, but also being the white couple, with their white kids, here in a nuts.
Funnily enough, the color issue never actually came up. That actually never came up, so we didn't have to worry about that. And coming here as foreigners, well, I'd grown up in South Africa, so I'd spent my first 19 years in South Africa. So I had a different experience to growing up in England. Anyway, I didn't grow up in England. I actually grew up in South Africa. So my biggest culture shock was moving from South Africa to England, to be honest with you. When we came here to the Philippines, it wasn't too much of a culture shock because by then we'd sort of met people, and you know, as you get older in life, you meet more and more people from different cultures. So it wasn't too much. My wife was born in Singapore, lived there for many years, for a few years. Then she went off to Australia. So by the time she came back to England, she too was a foreigner in her own town. So coming here was not too bad. Although I must admit, I came out here originally just for 3 months. The company sent me here. They said, we want you to go to the Philippines. And I said, where's the Philippines? And they said, oh, over there somewhere, past Vietnam, past Hong Kong. So I said, okay. So I looked it up on a map, and I thought, okay, I quite like this because I can use the Philippines in 3 months as a jumping off point to go to Hong Kong, Taiwan, Beijing, da-da-da-da-da. So that's why I said to the company, okay, send me there. I'm looking forward to it. I had been here for no more than about 3 days. And I called my wife and I said, you know, I really like the Philippines. And I think we should stay here a bit longer, or I should stay here and you guys join me for longer than 3 months. So she said, well, what's so exciting about the Philippines? And I must admit, it just caught me here, and I thought, oh, blimey, what do I say? I said, well, okay, there's potholes in every road. Remember, I am going back 25 years. There's potholes in every road. There's electric wires hanging all over the place. It looks like spaghetti junction in the sky. And I said, the other thing is, all the men walk around with their T-shirts under their nipples. And she said, that is not a very good selling point to get us to come to the Philippines. I said, okay, thinking about it, the Filipinos are lovely, lovely people. I said, they are warm, they are generous and everything like that. And I found a few other things that I thought were very good. I said, they're very independent. The sari stores are everywhere. People want to be educated. So I said, you've got to come. Anyway, she came out. She spent 10 days here. And in those 10 days, she interviewed everybody from jeepney drivers, maids, middle-ranking workers, all the way up to making an appointment with the McCarthy Business Women's Association, which are the, you know, the really expensive living people. And after 10 days, she said, okay, baby, get a year's contract and I'll bring the kids for 1 year. So that's how we started the whole thing. She'd fallen in love with the Philippines in those 10 days, but still she had this hankering after, let's stay in Britain. Everything that we know is safe there. The grandparents are there, the cousins are there, etc. So it was only a year's thing. Well, I couldn't get a year's job, to be honest. The company wouldn't let me go. Or sorry, the company wouldn't let me stay here. They said, no, you're going to come back to the UK. We only sent you there for 3 months. So I started networking like crazy. And I started to get some gigs, and then eventually went back home because nobody wanted to hire me here. You know, there's only so much you can do as a sales manager, sales trainer, etc., etc. And at the time, they didn't really need somebody. So I went back home again, and I went straight back into theatre. And on the very last day in theatre, I was in a place called Hull, which is in the Midlands somewhere. The phone rang. There was none of these cell phones in those days. So the phone rang at the stage door. This guy called me and he said, Norm, this guy, he wants to speak to you. I think he's calling from a foreign country. I thought, foreign country? I don't know anybody in a foreign country because I'd been out of the Philippines then by about 4 months. I got on the phone and he said, hey, are you still looking for a sales manager's job? And I said, yeah. He said, somebody told me you'd left the country. I said, no. I've only been back for about 2 weeks for a holiday. He said, when are you coming back to the Philippines? I said, Wednesday. He said, can't you come Monday? I said, no, I can't come Monday, Wednesday. He said, okay, well, this is the deal. I want you to come here and I'm going to pay you this, this, and this. And I said, well, I have to speak to my wife. He said, okay, I'll pay you this as well. I said, no, I have to speak to my wife. He said, I'll give you a car as well. I said, no, I have to speak to my wife. He said, I'll give you a phone call. You don't understand. I can't just come. I've got to speak to my wife. Okay, call your wife in the next half hour. But of course, there were no cell phones. So I called I called my mother-in-law because I thought my wife was staying with her. And she said, oh, she's got to London for the day. Now imagine, you're in London, there's no cell phones. How am I going to tell this guy that I've spoken to my wife? So I took a chance. I called him back after half an hour and I said, yes, my wife is wildly happy with the idea and will come for 1 year. And then on the Sunday, I told my wife that we were going to the Philippines for a year. And she said, okay, yeah, I can do that. I can live with that. Here we are, nearly 25 years later, and the whole thing has changed. I came here working. She was the trailing spouse looking after the kids. She became the president of the British Women's Association within about 3 months. And you should have her on here to tell her all her stories of that, plus all her charity work.
Absolutely.
But over the years, it's gone like this. And now I'm the lazy so-and-so, and she's working like a Trojan in her company. So it's been an interesting sort of 24, 25 years, how we've evolved here as a family, as a couple, and how we've integrated into the Philippine culture, the psyche, the whole thing. It's been a good journey.
Absolutely.
Good journey.
Absolutely. No, that's one of the things that really interested me, and it's a story I hear not often, but it's funny. It happens quite a bit where it's, hey, I got this job for 3 months, and here I am talking to you 2 decades later. You know, it's like you can't explain it. It's not like laid out, planned out. It's very much, 3 months turns into a year, which turns into 2, which turns into 5, and then builds up, and then after a while, it becomes what and you kind of, as much as I'm sure, in the case. I'm not going to speak for your wife or speak for you, but you guys, when your wife before was saying, and I'm going to stop calling her your wife. If I don't mind, I can use her name, Sarah.
Sarah.
Sarah was, said before, hey, the Britain is what we know. Now it's like, hey, Philippines is what we know. It's like now you do that shift where you're into a different area that's your expertise. It's not you start out over here and then you go over here. Now your perspective is I'm on this side of the river looking back, and this is where I look at things. So I thought that was very interesting. So let's continue with the employment. So what you've evolved into is you've evolved into doing, apart from the voiceovers, apart from theater work where we met, you are also an actor on film, part of the amazing cast of Kayson's Game. Right?
Yeah. Brilliant.
Which was a phenomenal movie. Congratulations again.
Thank you.
I also wanted to ask you about, your consulting work, working with these companies here in the Philippines. What have been some revelations about working directly with the companies? What do you see with the companies in the Philippines versus maybe companies that you see in other countries in terms of their focus, their setup, their operations? What are some key differences? What makes a company a Filipino company and Filipino led, even with multinationals that come in? How do they become Filipino in that sense?
It's a very good story. I'm actually not sure because I'm now no longer aware of what is not Filipino and what is Filipino. But I take your point. I mean, having worked for nearly 18 years in the corporate world as the head of sales or as the head of this or as the head of that, and then coming into sort of semi-retirement and finding that people still wanted my skills, I found out, as you say, I was doing a lot of consulting on various issues, generally on sales and sales training and marketing and that sort of thing. But that has been fascinating because you'll get a call from a company. I don't know, I don't want to use a big name, but let's say Coca-Cola, for instance. Now, Coca-Cola is not a Philippine company, but it is one of the biggest companies in the Philippines. And although it's run by a foreigner, the people surrounding him are local people. And so it's been fascinating over the years to help those local people because you actually get various levels. I remember recently I was down in Cebu working for one of the big international banking companies, and there was a team there of about 30 people. I had to spend 4 days training on presence and that sort of thing. and they were the most amazing bunch of ladies and gentlemen you've ever seen. I was going to say kids because, you know, anybody under 70 is a kid to me, but these were all in their sort of late 20s, early 30s. And what an incredibly switched on, amazing bunch of men and women. And they were high up, they were managers, and what they gave me back was probably more than I gave them. I mean, I can only give you so much, but just listening to them and their experiences and what they thought, and they took what I said and thought it through and then challenged me. I loved that experience. Sometimes it's not as nice as that. Sometimes you'll get a classroom full of people, or not, it's not a classroom, because I don't believe in training. Training, I think, is what you do if you have an animal, right? Your guest last week, McLeod, trains animals. You can't train people.
If you don't mind me interjecting,
yeah,
there
please
is a
do.
difference I found out. There's technical difference between training. The new term is keeping, or what was it? Conditioning? I think it's conditioning. So yeah, but I hear you. I know it's. I love it because you just made this great connection between two episodes that are totally different colors, but they just meld into one, and
yeah,
that's a good call.
Yeah. So yeah, training is one thing. You train a dog to sit up, or condition an animal to do something. Whereas with people, you can't train them. What you can do is you can throw something into the mix. You can educate. You can challenge. You can do all those sort of things, and that's what I love doing. That's what I love doing. So at that point, you're not necessarily working with the big corporations because you're not at that level. They've actually hired you to come in and teach or pass on something to their senior managers or lower managers. So you're not actually getting totally involved with the corporation and how they run themselves. So that's why it's tricky for me to be able to say, yeah, that working with that corporation was just different to that one. Although, you know, when I was a corporate person, you know, the old suit and tie and the short back and sides and no beard.
Yeah.
What a boring time.
That was a few weeks ago, right? That was pre-pandemic.
I found this is going to sound a bit negative. It is not meant to be negative. I mean, I was in a huge company, and we had 10 senior people. But the meetings, the boardroom meetings, sometimes I want to tear my hair out. That's why I'm getting bald up here, because I would tear my hair out with some of the idiocy coming out of these people who had these high positions. Not always, but sometimes. And I'd sit there going, oh, I don't believe what I'm hearing now. And then, fortunately, we'd move on to something else. And then their skills would come into being on their particular field. So I found that people are very, especially in the high companies, that people are specialized in what they do. And that actually goes through the Philippines. There's kind of a silo mentality in many companies, whereas you look after you and your people and you don't care what the guy next door is doing. Whereas you should all be working together, as it were, for the greater good of the team, for the company, etc., etc. So that I found kind of strange. And once I got used to that, it became easier to run. Another thing is, and this may blow your mind, I had a reputation back home of being very quick. We've got to do this. We've got to do this. This has to happen now. This has to happen now. Do this, do that, do this. And when I came here, that didn't happen. It just didn't happen. I had to slow down my reactions. I had to give people time to absorb and decide which way they're going. And that was fine, because some of the companies I worked in, we had, I took people who were probably, for instance, I worked in 2 big insurance companies, 2 of the 5 biggest insurance companies. And in the beginning, I sort of inherited a lot of what I called old dogs. You know what I mean by old dogs? Yeah. Old dogs, people that are so entrenched in what they think is you can't change their mind. So in my time, single track, this is the way it's got to be, and it didn't matter if you came up with something fresh. But what was great, I ignored them for a while, and I started looking at the next level down, and even the next level down, and I started to groom some people into the job to make them better at what they were doing. And I look now, and in some of the, probably the 5 top insurance companies, the people that I trained is the wrong word, the people I exposed to better things are now running those companies, are very, very high up in those companies. That gives me an incredible amount of pleasure to think that 12 years ago I discovered you on a very low level, and now you're running your company, or you're running a big part of your company. And that is such a joy. That, to me, actually encapsulates what this whole thing is about, taking people and building them and building them and building them, and then saying, go. I think there was one guy once said, your children are not of you, they are from you, and when they get to a certain age, you have to take them, pull the bowstring back, and let them fly off into the future. And I like to think that that's what I did with the people that I worked with, as well as my own kids, that you gave them the confidence and the belief in themselves, a bit more knowledge, and then they were able to move forward, leave you behind. Hey, you don't matter anymore. And they go and make their own path. That, to me, is the greatest thing about teaching people, building people up, and that sort of thing. It's lovely. Love it.
That's great. That's awesome, Norm. I love it. Hey, man, let's go for a commercial break, and we come back. I got something I want to tail off that. Thank you very much. You guys are all watching the new channel. We'll be right back. Welcome back, everybody, to Foreign Affairs. I am your host, Lee O'Brien, and this is the new channel. And as I've said before, this is one show of many. This channel came about here during the pandemic, rose up out of the conflict, the restraint, and all the issues, and has come on to have numerous shows that are now on air that you can enjoy. So this is just one of many shows. And actually, if you look on the screen, you'll see the list of shows coming up here that you can enjoy. You can tune in just about any day of the week, any time of day, and catch all sorts of different shows that are just amazing different topics. There's such a wide variety here on the new channel, such as The Big Picture, shares inspiring stories of notable personalities from Mondays to Fridays, 7 p.m. HR Hotline introduces us to the wonderful world of human resources management, Tuesdays, Thursdays, and Saturdays at 1 p.m. Have an insightful Saturday afternoon because the family business is everyone's business at 4 p.m. on Saturdays. The Fourth Project is about life, business, and success stories live from Dubai, UAE. That's at 6 p.m. or 10 p.m. Philippines on Saturdays. Then we're also talking about Usapang Beauty is about beauty beyond what your eyes can see. Thursdays and Saturdays at 5:30 p.m. Philippine time. The world has faced an unprecedented pandemic. Time to hear positive testimonies straight from those who recovered from the disease. COVID stories are on Saturdays at 10:30 a.m. Discover your life purpose and learn from others' turnaround stories by tuning in to U-Turn. Mondays and Thursdays at 10:30 a.m. The Home Buyer is where you hear remarkable stories about building and owning property. Mondays and Thursdays at 4 p.m. Laugh and learn through the Puppet Stories, Mondays at 5:30 p.m. I hope I'm getting that right, the Puppet Story. Magbenta Bumili at Tumulong dahil bukas na ang TNC Marketplace, an online night bazaar, Thursdays and Fridays at 10 p.m. YOLA is for all of us to understand that law is fun and cool too. Thursdays at 8:30 p.m. Watch and learn about money and more. Streams live from the Philippines and the U.S. Tuesdays at 8:30 p.m. Philippine time and 5:30 a.m. California Pacific time, USA. Two leaders in one platform, TNC The Talk, Mondays at 12 noon. After Shift is chillax and show about your choices and lives after work, Wednesdays and Fridays at 8:30 p.m. Discover and learn strategies on self-leadership to win in life through Win Within, Saturdays at 8:30 p.m. Dream, achieve, nurture, and inspire. Tag your kids along and watch Danny Art Show. Those are on Fridays at 5:30 p.m. Because health is wealth. The Health Line on Wednesdays and Fridays at 4 p.m. More upcoming shows as Awesome Day, Women at Work, Cyber Next, Tech U, and GGNO, or Girls Good Night Out. Good Girls Night Out, excuse me. Didn't mean to chop that one up. And then also catch our TNC original shows such as One Day, an inspiring 30-minute storytelling. It alternates with TNC Town Hall, co-hosted by TNC founders Lloyd and Apple. This show is where we talk on TNC. More upcoming shows, TNC shows that will truly inspire you. And then, of course, we're sitting here with global issues, common interests, learn together across borders, foreign affairs, streams every Tuesday at 10:30 a.m. Philippine time. And please follow our channel on Facebook and YouTube and let us help you hashtag see the new you. So back here on Foreign Affairs, I'd like to bring back Sir Norman McLeod. We're not going to wait for the Queen to knight you, sir. We're just going to call you, we're going to knight you here on Foreign Affairs. We'll give you that. So on the tail end of what we were just talking about, about training or working with sales professionals, and then as well as raising kids, about the idea of, children don't come out about you or for you, they come from you, and learning. A friend of mine brought up a great quote when her father recently passed away. My dear friend Kai said that her father taught her, he meant, well, he had two things to give her in life. He wanted to give her roots and he wanted to give her wings. And so the roots are like the foundation, how you start, the morals, the beliefs, and then the wings, the abilities to fly, the capacities and talents that lead you to fly. Focusing on that quote, I actually wanted to focus and take this time on this part of the segment to talk about your roots. You've briefly mentioned you were born and raised in South Africa. And if we do the mathematical calculations, you're a young buck, but that means you were there right in the middle of apartheid. You lived right with it, experienced, a style of life that probably a lot of people can't even identify with or comprehend, what it's like to have an actual physical establishment of separation of races within a community or a society. And so I, wanted to ask you, when it comes to, the apartheid time, in your life, what was it like for you to, now that you've been down the road of the UK and the Philippines for 25 years, you've lived in places that are totally different. What are some of the realizations that you came to have about, having lived in apartheid? What did you come to realize about life and about life then, and maybe what are some things that maybe you were not aware of when you were in the apartheid existence, and dealing with that compared to when you went abroad?
Yeah, well, actually, apartheid actually came in later, but there's always been segregation in South Africa. Segregation goes back hundreds of years, but it was never enshrined in law. That was the problem with apartheid. It was enshrined in law. So let's just look at slightly historically. I was born in 1948. The Afrikaners, there are something like 23 tribes in South Africa. Let's start there. One tribe is white English stock. One tribe is white Afrikaans, French Huguenot stock. And one tribe are what I call the immigrants that have come in, who are peasants in their own land. And they come to South Africa, and suddenly the law says, you're better than 4/5 of the population, which made them the worst tribe. I hate to tell you that. But anyway, so they've got these 3 white tribes, and then you've got something like 18 black tribes. And the biggest ones are the Zulus, the Sotho, Xhosa, and a few like that. So at the time when I grew up, or when I was born, that's when the Afrikaners came to power for the first time, the nationalist government. And they continued this sort of segregation thing. So as I was growing up, all I knew is that we had servants, a bit like you have here in the Philippines. But your servants in South Africa it was a feudal system. We had a cook, we had a cleaner, we had a yaya, we called her a nanny, and we had a gardener. So as a kid, you're growing up, and these people are all around you. But so are their kids as well, because if your main house is here at the back of the garden, there is what we call a kaya, which is where the servants stayed. But of course, they're staying in your territory, in your area, so that's not a problem. And they've got kids there, and we used to play together. We had a swimming pool. We'd all been in there swimming together, and nobody ever thought about any difference between color and that sort of thing. The first time it actually occurred to me that there was a difference is at the age of 8, I went to an all-boys school, and there were 2,000 white boys there. And I thought, wow, Mum, why isn't Philemon here? Why isn't Solomon here? And she said, well, they've had to go to another school. And I kind of questioned it for a few days, but you're 8 years of age, you kind of accept that you're not going to see Philemon and Solomon until maybe the weekend, and then actually within a year, you're never going to see them again. So that was the first thing. You then go on through your years, you're used to, your servants are used to more black people traveling around, so you don't question the system. My mother was a member of the Black Sash. The Black Sash was a group of women from all different colors and all different races who used to stand on street corners, literally with a black sash over their shoulder, not speaking. Took a leaf out of Gandhi's book, sort of quiet protest, non-violent protest. And these women would literally be standing 2 or 3 feet apart in the early days. But as the years moved on, and I think I started questioning this when it became a republic in 1960. So by then I was 12. I started thinking, well, wait a minute, what is happening? Why can't I spend more time with black friends? And in fact, when the republic came, this was hysterical. We knew there was going to be a big march down the main road from the Prime Minister's residence all the way to a place called Church Square. And my best friend's house was on that road. So we climbed onto the roof. We knew that when we became a republic, we'd no longer be part of the British Empire. So we stuck a big flag, well, at least 10 foot long and 8 feet deep, a big British flag on the roof. Wow, the trouble that hit the fan, I tell you, it was unbelievable. We had the police there threatening to shoot us if we didn't come down and take it off, because obviously they didn't want the British flag flying on their day when they become a republic. I only really started checking it out and becoming disturbed by it a couple of years later, from the age of about 14 onwards. I started thinking, wait a minute, this is not right. For instance, and by now I was getting naughty, I would walk down a road and there'd be a group of black men standing up in a police car. Now, the reason why the black men were there is all Africans had to have what's called a passport. That means that if you were out of your territory, if you were supposed to be living and working in Makati, and you went to BGC, you better have your passport with you, otherwise you'd be arrested and thrown into jail. It was insidious, insidious. And I saw these guys, I think I was 16, and I lined up one day behind them, got to the front, and this young copper said to me in Afrikaans, "What do you think you're doing here?" And I said, "Well, I just saw these people lining up. I just thought I'd come and find out what it's all about." And they got a bit stroppy with me and almost threatened me. So I had to actually go away. But I started to do little things like that to try and screw with the system, as it were. Because you suddenly realize from that age onwards that it was very big divide between black and white. In fact, when I took Sarah there, we went to South Africa about 4 years ago. When I took Sarah there, we visited the Apartheid Museum. And although I thought I knew all about it, and I'm pretty sure I knew most about it, and I tried to tell her about it, it wasn't until we both went to the Apartheid Museum that we were stunned by even how much I had missed while I was growing up. So I think that is what it was all about. You knew that something was wrong. You knew that the law was wrong in separating black and white. Here we are. When I'm 17, I go on holiday, and the waiter at my hotel is a chartered accountant. My father is a chartered accountant, and yet he's making tons of money in Johannesburg, and this guy makes more money as a waiter in a holiday hotel than he can if he acted as a chartered accountant in his own area. And those are the kind of things that I found that were beginning to gnaw at my system, as it were. I never really did anything totally naughty. I mean, by the time my mother gave up being the Black Sash, the women were being threatened all the time. They were being beaten up. And so instead of being 2 feet apart, they'd now be 30 feet apart, because that's the only women they could find to volunteer for the Black Sash. Well, there was one day, I worked for the government for a couple of years, because the theatre was actually run, a lot of it was run by the government. So that's how I worked for the government. And this university, they called the University of Witwatersrand, was actually, at that time, still one of the few multiracial universities in South Africa. Black, white, students, teachers, the whole damn shoot. And then suddenly the government decided we're going to make it a whites-only university. So, of course, the entire student body and the entire teaching body decided to have protests. But they knew that if they went onto the roads, they would be in trouble. So they decided to stay within the boundaries of the university. And I joined them every day, took food, drinks, and that sort of thing. But I had to be back at the theatre at 6 o'clock for my shows. But I remember this one day we looked up and we didn't do anything. A lot of the young Afrikaners would be throwing things at us, dead cats, catapults with stones. And the student leaders were saying, don't do anything, don't encourage them to come here and make our lives a misery. We are doing a peaceful protest. But one day, we just saw Black Mariah after Black Mariah coming along. And as far as your eyes could see that way, and as far as you could see that way, these Black Mariahs stopped. And out of the back, disgorged 10 guys per Black Mariah, ready for trouble. Helmets, shields, the whole thing. They stood there for half an hour looking at us. Then on a whistle, they all came rushing across the road and hitting everybody with batons and things like that. It was horrendous. We knew then that we'd actually lost that particular battle. But that was probably one of the worst. When I was 19, I decided to leave the country. I decided I couldn't cope with that anymore. If you did actually stand up and be counted, it didn't matter whether you were black or white, the likelihood is you would end up in jail. And if you ever saw the film Cry Freedom with Denzel Washington many years ago, the end of the film, they've got all these names scrolling down. And these are the names of the people that so-called slipped on a bar of soap when they were taken into the, well, it was called John Foster Square, which was the head of the police station, but it was more like a torture chamber. The stories that came out of there are screaming, crying, covered in blood, and then slipping on a bar of soap. They didn't slip on a bar of soap. They were thrown over the edge and dropped 7 stories and died. You know what I mean? But if you look at that, how come so many people are so clumsy, slipping on a bar of soap So those are the kind of things that were happening, and we were trying to ignore. But there comes a time when you just got to go. You just have to go. And although we went back again recently, and of course the country's been free for 25 years, unfortunately it's moving in a different direction. You get fabulous people there, but you're also getting more and more of the Julius Malema, and he's blaming the whites for everything. This is because the whites did it. Well, hell, we haven't been running the bloody country for 25 years, so you can't keep blaming what's happening now on what happened then. So it's kind of reverse apartheid now.
Right.
But actually the word apartheid is a very funny word. In Afrikaans, apartheid sounds terrible. But actually the word means separate development. So if you want to be sort of nice about this, separate development came about because they thought that because a lot of the Africans came from the countryside and were not able to cope with the sort of modern world happening, they could develop separately. What a bad idea. But you can't have separate development enshrined in law. So the day they said apartheid is taking place, they then had to invent another law to make that law happen, then another law, and another law, and another law, and it just went on like that until the point is to actually support that first law. I think there was something like 2,500 other laws. It was ridiculous beyond belief. Fortunately, we're coming out of it. But that was my growing up. That was my first 19 years of my life in that atmosphere. But again, as I said, it was a feudal system. So a lot of the black people that I knew in theater, that I knew our maids and our driver, I mean, they were incredibly lovely, lovely people. I have more stories in my mind from a maid that used to, from our nanny that used to bath us when we were 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and after then you'd sort of get a bit adult and you didn't want your nanny in the room with you. But those stories that you used to tell us when we were in the bath, wow, I think that's what fired my imagination to go into professional theater. There were such brilliant, brilliant stories.
Right. Absolutely. So I guess my question is this. Now that you've moved on to so it's kind of the flip of what I asked you before. What you've moved on now to other places where there's supposedly no apartheid. And how would you say there's similarities in the other places you've lived to that?
I take your point there. We had a law that said if you were black, you were not a human being, and if you were white, you were okay. But I think in every country, you look at India, even this country here, look at every country. There are cultural levels. There are the people at the top rank, the snobs, the people that have got money and property and that sort of thing. And they look down upon the others, right? And then the middle rank still look down upon those at the bottom. So there's always a cultural caste type system in every country. You don't actually need a law to say you're different, because it unfortunately happens socially. You have people, well, even just looking out of the window here, I can see those that are considered on the lower level, and then those that are on the middle level. And then, of course, now we've got, when I first came here, I was stunned. And I don't know if I can do this here. Yeah. There was a very small rich level, much smaller middle class level, and then everybody else below that. The great thing about the 25 years here is the middle class level has come up. There's more money available. When you start getting higher, there's more money available. So the middle class level has come up. We couldn't have all these Starbucks and condos and Lord knows what else if there wasn't that growing level of middle class. Unfortunately, not all the people that are now in the middle class, they're almost glad to have got out of where they were. You know what I mean? Yes. So they're not looking after too many of the people that are still coming up through the ranks, or are still at the bottom, or will stay at the bottom for the rest of their lives, unfortunately, because that is life. And we get the same in our country, and I think India is a perfect example, and I'm sure you get the same in your country. There is always this class system, or this caste system, which makes sure that somebody's right on top and somebody else is right at the bottom. And that's, I think, where it hasn't changed. Yes, apartheid made it law, and apartheid said we have to be like this, but it happens everywhere. Actually, I had a fight with an American teacher once when my kids are at school. It was lovely because my kids came home and they said, "Dad, apartheid was also in America." I said, "No, it wasn't." They said, "Yes, it was." I went to see the teacher and she said, "Yes, we had apartheid." I said, "No, you didn't. You had segregation. That was one man choosing to fight another man because of the color of the skin. In our country, it was enshrined in law. That's the big difference with apartheid and segregation."
Right. That's crazy. That's amazing to think about that. It can arrive to that in a legal sense, but it's also very much, I don't know if it's human nature, but it's a societal evolution in so many parts of the world. It's just like, even you go to school, there's always the big dog on the playground, and then there's always someone who gets picked last, and there's the servants, and in metaphorically speaking, you can go any way. Norm, we're going to break one more commercial, but we're going to continue on this topic and do a little diversion, but make it a little more personal. We'll be right back here on the new channel.
Fine, terrific.
Welcome back to Foreign Affairs. I am your host, Lee O'Brien, here on the new channel, and would like to bring esteemed guest, Sir Norm McLeod. Come back on, sir. Norm, you there? Well, I hope he's still there. Norm? Well, all right. Well, while we wait for him, see if he comes back, just some amazing stuff. I'll be honest, actually, I was hoping to steer more some of the conversation today more towards his theater background and experiences, but when it comes to topics such as apartheid, such as raising children here in the country, just incredible information and experience that Norm's been able to share with us and show here on the show, and I think we've got preliminary indicate. Yeah, there he is. Got it. Welcome back, sir. Glad to have you back. No problem. I thought you left. Lunch is lunch, because food is the most important thing here in the Philippines, and it takes priority over everything. So I would have understood. Don't worry.
So called next door quickly, and I thought, oh, not to worry.
Well, no,
here I am back again.
I got time for two more questions.
Right.
And the first one comes right off the heels. I liked, there was a little nugget about what you said in the last one when you were breaking down the tribes, and you were explaining, we're gonna get a little, we're not gonna sit there and be totally nice. Let's be honest and speak with candor here. But you brought up the part about the tribes, the 18 black tribes, and then the 3 tribes. First one made of British, second made of the Afrikaners, and then a third of the immigrants who came in to the country and then all of a sudden, gained status, power, and esteem all of a sudden overnight, thanks to a written law. I'll just be blunt. Have you ever seen that happen here in the Philippines with foreigners?
No, I haven't seen it here. I mean, look, foreigners here usually come in at a higher level, don't they? Because they usually come in to run a company for 3 years. So it's not so much they come in on a tribal basis. And in fact, when I first came here, the only place you could meet foreigners, there were about four bars in Makati, which you could meet a foreigner. But now foreigners can come in and I probably won't see them for 15 years because there are so many different places. There's Makati, there's Manila, there's Ortigas, there's BGC. There's a whole pile of places here now in Manila itself. Never mind, there's a huge group of foreigners down in Cebu. I've seen them, and a huge group in Davao as well. So there are many more foreigners here. So they don't have a chance to sort of group together and club together and become outside the system, as it were. So I think that's the first thing. But the point was that the foreigners would come in, and I'm thinking in terms of, actually all of them, the Lebanese, the Spanish, the Portuguese, the Italians, the Israelis. They would all come in, and in their own country, they'd been way down the pecking order. And here, suddenly, the government said, guys, you have the right to call yourselves white in our country. And that they took to extremes. They were stupid. They should have actually been nice about it. In fact, I remember there was one thing. There was a British guy came. He was working with my father, so he was only going to be there for about 5 years. And we went to a dinner at his place, and we didn't have it, but his maid had little uniform on, and when they rang the bell, the maid and the people would come in and serve you. And at one point, he was, I thought, pretty rude to his maid. And I think I was only about 8 at the time, and I turned to my mother and I said, why is Mr. So-and-so being rude to his servants? And there was a huge pause at the table. And then she said, we'll talk about it later. But I think I'd made my point without actually meaning to make my point. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
He spoke, even coming from England, he thought he was above everybody else, son of a bitch.
Right. Well, I think you saved your parents the risk of having to speak out, and when an 8-year-old's popping some truth down, then maybe we got to look at what's going on here, huh?
yeah, it's not acceptable. Well, I think I learned that very early, because I remember once I gave our cook a bit of lip, and I couldn't have been more than 5 or 6, so I got a clip across the ear that sent me flying. And my mother turned to me and she said, these are not your servants. They are part of our family and they look after us. If I ever hear you speak to any of our helpers again like this, you'll get another smack. And I think that was a wake-up call that it doesn't matter where you are in the pecking order of life, you have a value at that order, and you have to just keep on. We had a cook, great cook. We had a great gardener. You know what I mean? Everybody had a value at their level. And a little 5-year-old whitey didn't have the right to be rude or obnoxious or anything else. And I think that was a good lesson.
I think it's a great sub-metaphor or a smaller example of what the big, societal country issue was going on there in so many different places. Just because someone's in those positions, doesn't mean you all of a sudden have power and authority over them.
Yeah.
And you're misconstruing what, exactly their value is. And you think all of a sudden, there's a ranking system being played out, when in reality, you sit there and belittle them, you're taking away your own benefits. That's one thing the thing I can only speak to is, for example, in my home country, when it comes to Black people and African Americans, I don't understand how you can be racist towards African Americans or Black people or look down on them when the entire country was built on them, by their efforts, by their sweat. You know, like you and nowadays you can go down through music, through sports, through everything, and they're the biggest contributors. Why are we? How can you sit there and think any less of them? You know, how does that work? But I digress. So, anyways, I guess I got one more question for you, Norm, and
Okay.
be
Shoot.
honest. You've been the white guy going to all these different countries. Have you ever been called an imperialist? Please enlighten the audience on that, because I got my tongue deep in my cheek, and there's a lot of layers to this, and it's not just some innocent question. Please expound. What happened?
Well,
There was a time.
I was called a honky once in England, and that was quite interesting.
Yeah.
There was a sort of an epithet before it, so I won't actually go into that, but it was you honking. And I thought, what have I done wrong other than being born white? But anyway, no, in this country here, you and I know, we were working with a well-known actress, and rehearsals were going pretty well, and I couldn't get my head around the French accent I was supposed to be doing. And so we kind of listened to the director speaking all the time, but the notes for me and the notes for you and the notes for somebody else were usually fairly minuscule. So we just sort of sat there, and she must have taken this to heart one day, because the next thing I knew, she was calling us a couple of old imperial dogs. And I thought that was, I love that. I love that. I want to be an old imperial dog. I like that.
Yeah. I felt the notch in my belt come to fruition. Like I had made it. I was like, yes, call me imperialist. Yeah. That is why now we comfortably address her as my fellow imperialist, because
Yes.
we've been called, so we're just owning it.
We are.
You got to own it. Own it.
You got to
That's
own
the
it.
way it is.
Yeah, you can't pretend it's never been said. It's out there on the table. In fact, if you remember, I actually wrote on my script. I wrote on my script, this script belongs to Norm McLeod, the old imperialist dog.
Dog.
Because I was just feeling that kind of evil.
Yeah.
But it was good fun.
That's it.
It's all been good fun.
People will put tags on you. So the resounding lesson of our interview today was people will put tags on you. So there it is. Hey, I gotta say, Norm. Well, I don't feel like we're imperialists. I feel like we're philanthropists, and that's the good thing about you and I. And I'm so thankful for having you today on the episode. Thank you for sharing your wisdom. And most of all, I know you're in the middle of a job, so thank you for sharing your time with us. Thank you very much, Norm McLeod, for being here on Foreign Affairs, brother.
Take care.
Thank you.
Good luck.
Godspeed. God bless. Thank you, man. It's always a good time with Norm. I can't say it enough. The guy is. I had the honor of meeting him when we first started working together, and I literally every time I meet with him and hang out with him, I have just an amazing time. And can listen to his stories all day, but he's just such a kind, big-hearted, and wise gentleman. And he's been knighted by Foreign Affairs as a knight, so we'll call him Sir Norman McLeod from now on. But it was just an absolute pleasure to have him here on today on Foreign Affairs, and really just backs up the style of this show. And that's why I'm also glad that he was here, because that's exactly what we're going for here, is to be able to talk to someone who's living in a different land, who's lived in different lands, and can share some wise, feedback, some wise learnings and things that they've seen in the track. Because basically when you move abroad, you start to learn a lot about yourself and a lot about others, and it all gets thrown on you, but eventually you're able to come out and make sense of it all and truly contribute something back to everyone else. So I'm just glad we had a chance to interview Mr. Norm McLeod. Thank you guys for tuning into Foreign Affairs. We will see you next Tuesday at 10:30 a.m. My name is Lee O'Brien. You can follow me here every Tuesday at 10:30 a.m. or feel free to check out my social media on Instagram and Facebook at Lee O'Brien. And also wanted to tell you guys about the vlog that my girlfriend and I, Miss Pokwang, and I have. Every week we put out new cooking videos and family videos and fun videos. Poke Lee Cooking Official on YouTube and on Facebook. And also, if you guys want that taste of home, I can't hype it enough. We have Poke Lee food products. We put out suka, laing, aligay, tuyo, tinapa, fruit jams. We got it. All these great Filipino classics, condiments, and ulam ready for you to eat. For all of you that are abroad, and I'm hyping this up, wait for it. Okay, wait for it. Our goal is to get abroad, and not just here in the Philippines, but abroad to all you guys. But most of all, thank you guys for tuning in to Foreign Affairs here on the new channel. We'll see you every Tuesday at 10:30 a.m. I'm Lee O'Brien signing off. Thanks, guys.